I used to reside in a quaint little town, and that's where this peculiar tale unfolds. At my job in McDonald's, I crossed paths with a girl named Lacey. We hit it off, and after some playful banter, she invited me over for a movie night at her place. At the time, I was 19, and it marked my first adult date, free from the simplicity of childhood. Living in the same small town, the journey to her house involved walking through a few streets, passing the Central Park, linked to the cemetery, and navigating a couple of roads, roughly a 20-minute walk. Filled with anxiety, I left my house around 6:30, just as the sun was setting. While passing through the cemetery, I noticed flowers on a grave, realizing I hadn't brought anything for her. Panicking, I impulsively grabbed the flowers still in their plastic wrap, hopped the cemetery fence, and proceeded to her house. Proud of my last-minute acquisition, I handed her the flowers, and we enjoyed drinks, food, and popcorn while selecting a movie. As the movie played, my nerves intensified, with a strong desire to kiss her. Amidst these thoughts, during a dark scene, I noticed a figure walking behind us in the reflection. Confused, I remembered her mentioning that her parents were away for 2 more days. Alarmed, I inquired if anyone else lived with her, to which she replied, "Just us." The focus shifted abruptly when the vase holding the flowers unexpectedly fell and shattered. Startled, we investigated, realizing it had moved significantly from its original position. Deciding to share my earlier observation of something walking behind us, she panicked. Trying to reassure her, we cleaned up the glass and opted to cuddle on the sofa. The following morning, as I walked home, I intentionally looked at the grave where I took the flowers. A pang of guilt hit me as I saw the name June Sams, a 9-year-old who had passed away a few months prior. Disturbed, I went to a supermarket, bought a larger bouquet and a Barbie, placed them on the grave, apologized, and continued on my way. Whether it was an attempt to appease a ghost or a creation of my mind, the spookiness ceased. Lacey and I didn't work out, but to this day, it remains one of the eeriest experiences I've had, a lesson in respect for the departed. I no longer take things from the dead. Several years ago, I used to be employed in an office situated close to a graveyard. My relationship with my colleagues was not great, so I often opted to purchase lunch downstairs and enjoy it on one of the benches in the cemetery. The surroundings were serene and peaceful, providing a nice escape from disturbances. One day, after finishing my sandwich and sipping the last traces of my coffee, I suddenly heard the unmistakable cries of a baby. Initially, I paid little attention, thinking it was a common occurrence for a parent with a baby to pass through the cemetery. However, the crying persisted, and after a minute or two, I turned around to investigate. To my surprise, I saw a baby on top of a grave plot. This sight unnerved me, a baby crying on a grave plot. Despite scanning the area, I couldn't spot anyone nearby. I cautiously stood up to get a better view, intending to find the parent, but there was no one in sight. Uncomfortable and wary of potential scams I'd heard about in the area, I decided to take action. Concerned, I looked around for any signs of deception, and not wanting to fall victim to a possible scam, I dialed the police emergency number. While on the phone with the operator, I explained the situation, provided my location, and was assured that help would arrive soon. As I waited, keeping an eye on the crying baby, doubts crept in. Maybe I was overreacting, and there could be a valid reason for the baby's presence in the graveyard. If no one showed up within a few minutes, I contemplated being the one to approach and check on the baby. As I moved toward the baby, a rustling sound behind me startled me, but it turned out to be just a squirrel. When I turned back, both the baby and the crying had vanished. I was utterly shocked. A crying child could not disappear so abruptly. Flooded with adrenaline, I found myself frozen in place, unable to comprehend the mysterious turn of events. I wrestled with my thoughts on how to explain this to the police. Eventually, summoning the courage to move, I ran back to my office where I arrived during lunch break. Instead of entering, I stared at the cemetery, half expecting the baby to reappear. It didn't. Shortly thereafter, a police officer arrived, and I approached them, explaining the strange sequence of events. Surprisingly, the officer didn't scold me. She seemed to understand. She informed me that this was the third reported sighting of a baby in the graveyard that year. Something eerie was happening, but the officers left without divulging further details. From that day forward, I refrained from having lunch in the cemetery and avoided the area altogether. The mysterious crying baby remained an unsettling memory, leaving me to wonder if the cries still echoed in that eerie graveyard. Before I delve into my encounter, a bit of background. My grandfather on my dad's side passed away when my dad was only 13. Growing up, I had no knowledge about him, except that he served in the Royal Navy. It was a topic I avoided, not wanting to bring up painful memories for my dad, uncles, or my nan, who never loved again after his tragic passing. Fast forward to 2012 when I was around 18. My younger brother Dom, age 13, and I went to our local cemetery with good intentions. Our older brother Louis and great-uncle Tom were buried there, and we showed our respects by cleaning their graves. After finishing, Dom needed to use the restroom, and the graveyard had one on the far side. As we approached, a strange feeling of being watched overcame me. To our surprise, the restroom was locked, an unusual occurrence. Desperate, I told Dom to go behind the toilet, assuring him no one would see. In the corner of my eye, about 10 meters away, I noticed a guy staring at me. I turned to face him, feeling a strange connection. He reminded me of my dad's brother, Uncle Andy, but I knew it couldn't be him. Uncle Andy lived 2 towns away and would have approached me. Moreover, the guy wasn't wearing glasses like my uncle. When I turned to check on Dom, I turned back, and the guy had vanished. Several weeks later, my brother and I gathered the courage to ask my nan about our mysterious grandfather. Reminding her that she could avoid the topic if it upset her, my brother approached her. As I joined them, my nan happily shared pictures of herself, my dad, and uncles. One particular photo caught my eye. It was my grandfather, strikingly similar to the guy who had stared at me in the cemetery.